Ladies, gents, and NBs, you've just entered the Last Save Lounge, a weekly interview show all about the games that saved our progress and a little bit of us. I am your host, Aaron Turbo Hoodie Amendola, and by golly, I'm happy you're here. I hope you're comfy, cozy. Hope you have your coffee ready. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click whatever doodly-doo you gotta do to support the show and help it grow into a giant, unwieldy podcast kaiju. As a reminder, new episodes every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts, with clips and video episodes on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Hello, YouTube. This week, I am joined by Tom Dyke, events manager, live stream producer, and all-around man about town. You can currently see him, or rather not see him, as a video producer for various videos in the McElroy Family oeuvre. He's also an experienced tabletop RPG designer for Pokemon-inspired modules like Rocket Lairs and Dragonairs. Isn't that fun? Let's welcome to the show, Tom Dyke. Tom, how you doing?
Hey, y'all. It's good to see you, Aaron. I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm excited about this episode for a multitude of reasons. Big one is when we get to your favorite game of all time, it's one that I've always felt like I was on the outside looking in.
That's fair, given all of it. Sorry to interrupt.
No. You know, dancing around it, it's a game that I own. I've bought it like 2 or 3 times because I was like, maybe this will be the time. But I'm excited to hear what that game meant to you. But before we get into that, is there anything you're currently playing that's scratching that itch?
Yeah, I think in this exact moment, I am playing, I guess not this moment, but more recently, I've been playing Fuser, which is...
Oh, of course you are.
An old harmonics game. So I work for the McElroy family of products. And one thing we do every year for the Maximum Fun Drive, as we are on the Maximum Fun Network, is have Griffin McElroy does a Fuser set. And for those of you who don't know, Fuser is a game by Harmonix that I think is like, basically you're just DJing with, game specific stems. I think it's like what DJ Hero wishes it was, to take another very weird game that no one's ever
2011's DJ Hero. And that's the year because I lived it.
Yeah, I had a buddy who had DJ Hero, and I remember him being really happy for one day and then really sad on day 2.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's just kind of a fun game that is, I guess at this stage would be abandonware, or like, you can't buy it anymore, but there are a lot of ways to download it if you just look it up on YouTube. And there's a fantastic community of people who make custom songs for Fuser so that you can keep mixing different tracks. And I've had a lot of fun, after seeing Griffin do those streams, downloading it myself. And I've got a friend, Henry, who I have been trading beats back and forth with. So it's been very fun to sort of go back and forth, see like what we don't like from each other. And I think it's just been really fun. It's really fun to just sit there and like mess with music you like and learn a little bit more about what works and what doesn't. The amount of times I've thought tunes would be so great together. I love these vibes. And then it just doesn't fit, or like something crazy, or learning that like a bunch of really fast rap that I don't normally listen to in my daily life is amazing when I put it over all these like pop punk and, metal songs that I like. And I'm just like, do this with a heavy beat, fast rap, everything sounds fun. So it's been great. It feels like very creative within a little box, kind of like Legos in the sense of let your creativity fly, but they give you the pieces to make you feel smart.
Yeah, man. Like Fuser was the DJ of my 2020 New Year's party, which
hell yeah
was just me, my wife, and my dog. And we just put it on like the pre-show mode, let it go. I totally understand what you mean though. Cause I went to school for musical theater. I can read sheet music. I understand it. But like a pop song, getting an idea of like what breakbeat works with the vocal line, that works with the bass line. It is so much fun to rearrange those Legos, like you said, and just see maybe this works, maybe that works. I've caught some of Griffin's streams before, and some of the downloadable tracks, some of the stuff that isn't native to the game that makes it in there. Ooh, that's a little funky. It's a good time.
It's so fun. And it's just like, it's so nice to see I love seeing a community of people work on a game because it can be so fun and it doesn't need I mean, obviously, I think the developers would love to continue working on it, but even if they're not able to just see a community continue to love a game, I think is so fun. And I think there are so many examples of that, and this is just one that I find delightful.
Well, let's talk about that, because games often go through like a second life, because once they get delisted, once they get shut off, there's often a small contingent of people that are keeping them alive. I'm thinking a lot about Halo 2 and 3 on the original Xbox. There
Yeah.
was that guy that stayed on Xbox Live for
Just like,
weeks. Like it's crazy, but
yeah, I remember hearing about that of like because like they wouldn't shut the servers off until someone logged off. So there was like
yeah.
I remember the story of the last people playing Halo 2, and I'm like that's so fun, and like those memories, and like I was never that hardcore, but I distinctly remember like those memories in like legitimately Halo 2 and 3, just like the hours in that like specific era, and like those are what meant a lot to me, and everyone's got that, whether it was the like the early MMO they played, or
Mhm.
uh, everyone's got some kind of game that just means something like that. And I love seeing the way that people find ways to bring it back to life, whether it's, just creating an emulator or like a way to emulate something that maybe you can't buy anymore, or if it's, trying to stay on Xbox Live, or if it's, making a different homage to it in some way. It's beautiful to see the way that people try to memorialize and remember games that meant a lot to them. Maybe
When
like starting a
Destiny
podcast
2,
about it.
hey, but what's another 40-year-old like me to do? I remember thinking that when Destiny 2 goes offline, I'm going to like have a vigil. I'm going to want to be there. I'm going to want to emote. You know, the transition from D1 to D2, I stayed in D1 until like that midnight and then
Yeah.
immediately hopped over. It's nice to see some games can have endings, but those games that are so social, to
Yeah.
be able to create a space for them online is really cool. You were taking the Nuzlocke runs with old Pokemon games, and that's a form of Pokemon playing that I've never interacted with. I've always, once again, been on the outside looking in, but it is a new way to interact with
Mhm.
this game that people have kind of been playing inside and out for 20, 30 years now. I know that you were streaming for charity, doing Nuzlocke runs, and obviously you've got your hands in the tabletop RPG space with that. What is it about that Nuzlocke run idea that appeals to you as a Pokemon fan?
Yeah. So I've been a huge Pokemon fan like since I was a kid. I had the like poster on the wall that I would point at every morning. Like my mom would like let me just read Pokemon to her if it meant I would eat my breakfast, sort of vibes. So I have that part of my brain that's dedicated to Pokemon.
Uh-huh.
I have just been obsessed with it for a long time, especially as a kid. And I think I had just played a lot of it in one way or another. And then I fell off of it for a while, hadn't played the games for maybe 10 years. I think the last game I'd played was probably Sapphire. And then I actually came back in when they did the remake of Ruby, or not, sorry, I said Sapphire, I meant Crystal.
Mhm.
Pokemon Crystal was the last game I had played. And then the one after that was Sapphire and Ruby. And then I came back in when they did the remake of that, if you can follow that, of like 10 years go by or so.
I
Uh,
remember Soul Silver. I used
yeah.
to have that game was on my shelf until I gave it to a cousin, and it felt like
Oh,
I was imparting an heirloom, you know?
okay, at least like yeah, good that you because like at least you don't feel bad about losing it because like I did go back and play Soul Silver after I got back into it, and I was like, I think Heart Gold, Soul Silver are probably the best games in
I
that
think
whole
so.
series. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'm a fan of the Johtos. I think they just I was young when they came out, but this is beside the point. I love
Yeah, yeah,
Pokemon, and
yeah.
the reason I got into Nuzlocke was really just because I found it to be a more interesting way to interact with the game. I have never been. I know there is a very detailed competitive scene that exists for Pokemon that is difficult and challenging and interesting. But that is not something I've ever, personally been interested in, that like multiplayer competitive aspect of it. I always liked the sort of like single player story, which if you're playing it the way the games are designed, gets pretty easy, it gets pretty rote after a certain period of time. It's the Nuzlocke challenge, which for those of you who don't know is there's a lot of rules, but basically the most specific pieces are you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter in each route. And if a Pokemon faints, it dies, or, you have to release it. If it faints, you're not allowed to just go back to the Pokemon Center. You have to fully release that Pokemon. So it adds a lot of tension to this game that you've maybe played a lot as a kid and didn't think about. And it can sometimes get easy to get into the grind. It makes everything feel very connected and emotional in the sense because also one of the not official rules but I think most common things to do is nickname all your Pokemon and like really feel that connection to them. That is the
So,
point of it.
like, it's terrifying to me that you're like, this Pokemon dies, it doesn't faint. What do you do with it? Like, do you just put it in a box and say, that's
Other,
often
people have different ways of doing it. I think the traditional ways say, yeah, you release the Pokemon and it goes, in the in-game mechanics, you hit release and it goes away forever.
ugh,
Some people will play it where, you could throw them in a box and then just take it out at the end. I think there's a bunch of like weird rules for, if you catch a shiny Pokemon or you encounter a shiny, like go ahead and catch it, but don't use it in your run or something because they're so rare. There's a lot of specifics that people quibble over, but I think that's really the point. And when I've played them, I think for me, it's been very important. Actually release it. Don't throw it in a box, like release it because
sense of
it is
permanence.
supposed to feel sad and bad, and it really does. And so I found that to be just very interesting to play that way. And then I used to stream on Twitch, and I thought it would be fun to try to embrace different versions of Nuzlocke because we were talking about great communities that keep games alive and find ways to interact with them. I think the Nuzlocke community is very specifically one of those that does a great job of, there are everything's from like trade locks, which are Nuzlocks where you have to trade with people, or like, there's a bunch. I forget most of them right now. Of course, I didn't look it up in advance like I should have, but there's a lot of different specific types that people do. And that was actually sort of what inspired me to create, Rocket Lairs and Dragonairs and Dungeons and Dragon types, which is a rule set that I created to basically play a Nuzlocke like it is a tabletop role-playing game. So you basically take your Pokemon and you assign them classes like you would in Dungeons and Dragons or any other game of choice, where you have like a paladin or a monk or a wizard. And I think that was very fun for me to like have a more in-depth relationship to what I was really obsessed with at the time in Dungeons and Dragons and a game I loved, Pokemon. And so I think that was my, specific fascination and contribution to that community. But I did it because I just saw what everyone else was doing. And I found it to be so interesting of the way that people chose to interact with these Pokemon games and find ways to create more joy from something that they loved, but had maybe become, rote for them, or maybe, wasn't giving them the same satisfaction just playing normally.
Totally, totally. I did something similar to you where I kind of get out of the game for 10 years because they're all the same. And
Yeah,
it's really,
100%.
do I like the designs? Do I like the region? And,
Yeah.
it's pure nostalgia, but Kanto, Johto, those are my boys. If
Hmm.
you were to put Suicune on the cover, I'd buy it.
Yeah.
But like that's easy. I've really come to love teaching my daughter about Pokemon. So we,
Yeah.
we did the thing where once she was able to crawl, we put up all the starters
Yep.
and Pikachu.
Good parenting move.
Yeah, man. And like, I didn't think I was going to get emotional, but she like tricked us out. She went to Bulbasaur and then like
Oh,
made a left hand turn, went to Charmander. And I was like, anyone you pick is great. And now she loves Pikachu. Like
okay,
we have like giant Pikachus everywhere.
great.
And there's
I
a
was going to say, I
really,
hate to be a jerk, but I was like, oh, Charmander's a rough one, in my opinion.
Charmander is hard mode because once you get up to Brock,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you should have gotten something else.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of re-experiencing the games through her eyes and
Yeah.
looking at them as like dogfighting games in a weird way.
Yeah.
So I'll load up Pocopia on Switch 2
Yeah.
and I'll say, who should we make a house for today? And we built a house for me and my Growlithe because our dog, we always say, looks like a Growlithe.
Oh,
And
very sweet.
really, really getting to take like everything I know and like steer her towards the things I know she loves. She loves birds. She loves penguins. So I'm like, there's a Pokemon for you. Let's do this.
That's so cool to be able to like, experience in that way of like something you have enjoyed, at some point in your childhood, went away from, like seeing it through fresh eyes, like how amazing that must be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's rad as hell, man. And gosh, if you're a parent and you want to give your kid a Pokemon thing, there's a lot of companies that'll sell you stuff. So that is a little
No
bit of a money
shortage from
pit.
the largest media conglomerate in the whole world.
From the most recognizable icon mascot on the
Yeah.
globe. Yeah. But I think it teaches young kids a lot about how to take care of animals.
Mhm.
We've used Pocopia in the way that you care for certain
Yeah.
Pokemon to teach her about this is how you feed the dog, this is how you pet the dog, this is what she likes, what she doesn't like. Choosing the way that you get to interact with a piece of media is something I think you learn as you get older. And your idea of giving back through those tabletop RPG books, I just think is rad as hell. It's a really cool way to take your love and pinball that around with other people.
Yeah, and I think it's fun. I like what you're saying too, of thinking about like, with Pokemon, or just how nice it is that you can interact with Pokemon in different ways these days, that it's not just the games that are about fighting and progressing. It's like Pokemon's an Animal Crossing. You can just experience it this way, which has always been the case. I like to tease my wife. We both collected Pokemon cards as a kid. I collected them because I was a nerd who liked to play. She collected them because she was a nerd who liked to organize them based on their colors. And I'm like, that's so dorky and that's so you, and I love you. But it's just different ways to interact. But I think especially with a kid looking back at these things that are so old, I don't think they have to be viewed necessarily one way or another, but when you interact with the games that are very clearly about battling, being able to see it in the sense where it's like, no, we're building for these creatures that we love. It's really nice to just see that tone exist in a way that is easily accessible and doesn't need to be something you have a talk about or something.
Yeah. That Detective Pikachu movie that took place in Rhyme City. It's like, no Pokemon battle here. They are our friends. I was like, this is what I want. This is the future. This is the future that liberals want.
And it is interesting with Pokemon because they're always like, the battle is critical for the games to work, but they always try to stray away from the battling. They're like, no, the fighting. They're like, oh, the fighting actually it's a key element of the game. But it's also real tough for us to sell cute Pokemon if it's dogfighting. Even Pokemon knows. So in their I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of the anime. That is a piece where I think there's probably a better line of that where people might be more educated. But I don't know. I think it's funny how they try to balance that.
Yeah. I used to watch the anime every day after school, and then I just sort of trailed off. But there's a really great show on Netflix called Pokemon Concierge. And it's got Karen Fukuhara from The Boys, who voices the main person. But it's strangely adult. It's about this woman who has a little bit of a mental breakdown due to the stress of work and the job in the city. So she goes to this Pokemon resort, and she's a Pokemon concierge where all she has to do is care for these Pokemon. And it's animated with stop motion felt.
Yeah, so I remember the design of it.
It's rad, dude. It looks like you can pick one up and you can feel the way that a Pikachu feels, and it's going to be different than a Squirtle. It's really, really cool. But that's what my daughter kind of grew up on. That's her first encounter with Pokemon. If I showed her a game where they have to battle, she'd be like, what's going on here?
And I think that it's obviously, credit to the company being big, doing whatever they want. But I do think it's nice that it's you can interact with it in so many ways. And I think there's still a lot of ways where it's hey, if you want that Pokemon battle, it's still there. But you can choose to just that things are cute and pretty. That rules, man. Good on, Pokemon are rad. That's so fun.
And they're supposed to be friends. They help out everybody in the respective towns. This could be the whole show, and I don't want that to be the whole show as much as it could. I do want to get to your favorite game, but before we get to the mid-tro, I'm going to lobby a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Pokemon off the top of your head?
Yeah, dude, it's Goomy. 100% is a water.
I gotta look that one up.
I can't remember if it's a water dragon type or a straight dragon type, but it was a Gen 6 Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's the base form of Goodra. And it's just a little goo ball, man. It's just kind of a cute little goo ball. He's got Pikachu style sort of cheeks. With a goofy Ditto mouth, and he just looks kind of like a cute slug ball. I love him. I just love saying Goomy. I think it's cool. I think he's rad. He's a cute dragon. Other than that, I'd say Bulbasaur and Dragonite. I gotta say 3. I love Dragonite because Dragonite is super fast and super cool, but also a thick king, which I think is just very important.
Big thighs.
Thick thighs, crush your head thighs.
That's really what the world of Pokemon needs is thick thighs saving lives.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we can represent on this show. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, dear listener, I'm going to leave you with the image in your head of Dragonite with thick thighs because it was always there. You just needed somebody to say it so it could come out.
And I'm sorry that I was the one to do it.
You know what? That's the whole reason you're here. I just wanted people to get incepted with Dragonite's thick thighs. When we come back from the mid-tro, we're going to hear about your favorite game of all time. But until then, the Last Save Lounge is supported by Patreon at patreon.com/hoodieweather. By supporting Hoodie Weather, patrons get a bonus segment each week, a bundle of Hoodie Weather games, and ad-free episodes in your feeds. If times are tough, I think you are too. You can still support the Last Save Lounge by subscribing to the show right now. By having more subscribers, we can attract more guests and listeners and continue to evolve into that giant unwieldy podcast kaiju. Be sure to rate and review us on your podcast app of choice. Tell your friends, tell your rivals. We're not picky. Thick thighs save lives. I'm back here with Tom Dyke. Tom, what is your favorite game of all time?
It's The Binding of Isaac.
And I love that. I haven't played this. What is The Binding of Isaac about? Like, if you had to sum it up in a skeet, what would it be?
Wow, a skeet. I'm not good.
I
been
almost
off
said
Twitter.
tweet.
Yeah,
and then I was
skeet,
like,
blue sky, whatever. I've been off those types of social media for a while. I've grown more verbose. But I would say in general, The Binding of Isaac is a roguelike game where you are a little kid who has to go, who is like trapped in his bedroom by a overly religious mother, and you play as like a roguelike game where you are moving and shooting tears as bullets, trying to escape through different levels of the house and your nightmares. It gets pretty wild at a certain point, but in general, what you're doing is you're a little child, you cry at weird enemies to make them disappear, and you travel through mazes, effectively trying to navigate lower and lower levels until you get to the end of the game, or what you think is the end of the game. And then you just keep doing runs with different items that give you different power-ups. And I just think it's beautiful. The reason it's one of my favorite games is I think it was just the thing that was one of my first exposures to roguelike games. A game
it was
where
for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely where where your progress doesn't stack. Like, it's just like, hey man, you got pretty far, but not to the end. That sucks. Try again. And you just keep trying. And that sort of repetitive addictability of the game was so fun, of just like, I can see myself getting better as I'm playing, knowing that nothing matters. If you have a bad run, you could just be like, well, try again next time. Maybe I'll get lucky. And I think that balance of skill and luck was really fun for me. And it just, it really hit my brain in a special way that has made me play it obsessively at multiple different points in my life.
Interesting. So it wasn't just like a release date hyper obsession. You keep coming back to it. So again, I know very little about this game other than it's developed in part by Edward McMillan, who did Super Meat Boy.
Mm-hmm.
Story-wise, I hear this and I hear a lot of themes that resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
The overbearing religious family. It's like Binding of Isaac feels very biblical.
Yes.
Is there anything about that?
Themes.
Okay. Like, can you go into a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I think it's really interesting. And I think the game does a good job of this, it sets up this story with like an animatic at the beginning, talking about how like, Isaac's mom is watching Christian TV. She thinks that the devil is talking to her son and trying to hurt her son. So she like locks Isaac up in his room, and Isaac doesn't like this and is trying to escape. And it's sort of this like, the whole initial thing is sort of this idea of like a religious parent has trapped this child trying to protect them, but that is actually sort of the initial sin of the game, is like this, this child's trapped and they're trying to escape. And so then that like loosely wields its way in throughout the game. Like, there are enemies that are related to both angels and devils and demons, and that sort of biblical theme is played in. There are items that are often, also biblically related. Most of the characters are biblical names and have, powers and abilities that sort of relate to biblical ideas. And I think it's just really fun. It's fun for me in a way of like, I was raised Christian. I wouldn't say raised like, overbearing Christian or like very intensely. I would say a pretty middle of the road, like very, I guess I don't know how to say this about Christianity, but like, I would say a very reasonable form of Christianity that taught you to be good and didn't really hate a lot of people.
I'm in the same boat. Like, I would not call myself religious by any sense now, but so much of that knowledge has seeped in where I recognize the names, I recognize the themes. Isaac is such a big name in the Bible that it's kind of hard not to draw the line from inspiration to direct reference.
Yeah. And I think it's fun, in the game of like, I think it's good color. Like, it's very good theming. There's also a lot of sort of like gross out humor and sort of like, how do I say it? Sort of like puerile stuff of just like, a lot of poop jokes, hot jokes.
Every good video game needs poop jokes.
Yeah. Blood, gore, things like that. But it's all and I guess I haven't mentioned this, it's all in a very sort of like hand-drawn cartoony style. Very and I think Edmund McMillan, the main creator of the game, has basically said it's sort of like he got his start doing sort of like Newgrounds style stuff back when Newgrounds was the place for games. And I think The Binding of Isaac is a really good example. I think a lot of his games since sort of are a good evolution of that style. I think a lot of people have moved away from it for good reason, of like, some of the tone of Newgrounds was not always the best. But I think Edmund's games, and I think The Binding of Isaac specifically, do a good job of sort of like taking some of that, like push the envelope a little bit, be a little gross, be a little pushy on things that people traditionally have been very sensitive about, like Christianity and religion, and, push on them in a way that I think is fun and interesting and, done from a place of understanding, a place of like this, it clearly was like something that he struggled with or, was involved with. So it's sort of a processing of that in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people might bounce off that style. I totally get it. I think it can be gross. It can be weird. You might not like it, but I think it is very much a specific perspective that is interesting. And I enjoy. And even if you don't enjoy it, I think it's something that is worth looking at. I think it's a clear vision from a creator that I think is very fun.
And he's always been very, very good at that. I feel like there's a lot of emotionality in just the way that Meat Boy tells its story. And what I've seen of Binding of Isaac, it comes from a very lived in space, from what I can tell. And I kind of want to try it now. Maybe I'll load that up on the Switch.
Yeah.
You said that
it's punishing. I will say the one recommendation I would have for you is if you can play it on PC, and this goes for anyone who doesn't play it, I'd recommend playing it on PC because there are so many items in the game and you used to have to like memorize what they did. Like I used to play this game with a wiki open in a different tab.
Okay.
I'm forgetting the specific name of the mod right now, but it's basically one of the top mods on Steam Workshop, built into Steam if you have it through Steam. But there's just a mod that you can add that just like tells you exactly what every item does, which is fun because in the original game, like it would just say like tears up, and you're like, okay, I guess that means my tear bullets go faster. Or like sometimes there's an item that would say like, what a horrible night to have a curse, and you turn into a big demon. And what that does is give you like a super powerful attack, but the game never tells you that. You just kind of have to figure it out. And for a while, the only way to like do that was by going to a wiki of somebody who had like mined the code and figured out what it is. But this mod does a great job of allowing you to just see that in game. And I think Edmonds even said like, yeah, that was maybe something I should have done. I'm really glad modders did that. And in his newer game, Eugenics, everything is like, it tells you exactly what everything does. So I think that's a thing that a lot of gamers these days would appreciate.
You reminded me, the reason I haven't played Binding of Isaac, at least I'm going to say right now, is because I have Eugenics. And it's there's so many great games for Steam Deck right now, from Titanium Court, Replaced, Eugenics. There's probably like Esoteric Ebb. Yeah. There's so many reasons for me to pick up my Steam Deck that I'm neglecting a lot of my other platforms. I feel like I don't play consoles anymore.
I mean, that's how I bought the Steam Deck specifically because, I mean, this changed for me, I think, really during the pandemic of like when I work from home, and I still work from home, I sit at my computer all day. I don't really want to keep playing games there. And like, the way our place is set up, the consoles are in the basement and my wife doesn't want to be there. But like, if I could just play it on my Steam Deck, I can sit next to the person I love and just play a game rather than be like, oh, I'll be in the basement, let's talk later. Like, it's, I mean, I hate to say it, but like, I've never been someone who cared a ton for graphics or fidelity. Like, they're fun and cool. But especially as I age, I think like twitchy shooters and other things just don't appeal to me. So like the types of games I enjoy are, the little games I can play on Steam Deck. And I think, Eugenics, you asked me what game I'd been playing earlier in the show, and I said Fuser. Up until about a week ago, it was Eugenics. Eugenics was like every night. Again, I think a lot of what I'm saying about Isaac would track with Eugenics as well, of like Edmund's tone and like the way that game, just allows you to chain runs together is so fun. I think it is a phenomenal game. Not quite, it hasn't hit me quite the way Isaac has, but it hasn't been 10 years. We'll see. Check in 10 years. Maybe I'll come back to it a few times.
I love the way that we get to interact with this medium now. I've been talking to my therapist about the word intentionality. And as somebody that has been coming out of playing Destiny 2 for 10 years, where that game a little bit felt like a job. You know, in order to
Mhm.
keep up, you have to play
Yeah.
over and over and over. But I wasn't necessarily playing the games that would fill my cup, that would like make my heart happy.
Yeah.
But now I'm experiencing this sort of renaissance where I'm going back to games I missed. I'm playing them on lower settings on Steam Deck because I get to lay on the couch
Yeah.
with my dog, with the window open, you know, and have
100%.
like a peach tea on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It's just rad. And a game like Binding of Isaac, I love that it doesn't place a ton of importance on its visuals outside of what you see is what you get,
Yeah, well,
you know?
I would say it really does place a lot of importance on the visuals, but not on
But
like
but
the
not in like a
quality. Like
not
it's
like
like
human like
yes,
looking
yeah.
shit.
Because I think the art is, and I think that's a lot of people. You can see this in the way that, like, as technology advances, there are certain games that you were like, "Whoa, that looks so cool," and now it doesn't look realistic, and it looks weird because it's not there.
Yeah.
Versus games that have like an art style behind them. Like, I think it's the reason so many people still connect with The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker, because like that
Mhm.
had such a specific art style that, like, even though those graphics may be dated, there was a goal and intentionality with it that sticks around. And I would argue Isaac is very much the same. And I was talking with a friend similarly about Mugenics, where they were like, I just can't connect with that art style. And I think that's fair, but I do think it has an art style. It has a, language that it's trying to speak to you in through its visual style. And I think a lot of games, and I think designers have become more aware of this, I think, for sure. And I'm just aware that, you can have a game with longevity. Like Stardew Valley looks beautiful to
Yeah.
this day because it's beautiful, stylized pixel art, not,
Oh
trying to make
man.
it realistic.
That's now 18 episodes in a row, dear listeners, where people have mentioned Stardew Valley.
Hell yeah,
And
dude. Hell yeah, dude.
but here's the thing. Here's the thing. I talked about this last week with Chelsea from Chelsea Blossom Games. I have Stardew Valley on PS4, which means I have it on Portal. Every time I've tried to play that game, I bounce off it. And it's not because of the visuals. Like I grew up playing a lot of these 8-bit, 16-bit games, but Pocopia really did unlock the cozy gamer
Yeah.
side of me. And I think I'm ready to give myself over to Stardew Valley, but I'm not sure my life is ready for it.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, I really don't know what to say there. The only suggestion I could have is maybe wait till your kid's old enough to enjoy it so you can at least call it family time.
I
Because
thought you were
it'll
going to
take a
say
lot of your brain.
wait till they're out
Uh,
of college and then you play it. I thought I was going to wait for Haunted Chocolatier or
yeah.
whatever the next
So
one
you'll
is.
wait
I
another 10
can't.
years for it or whatever.
Yeah, essentially. One
Is
thing
that
I
the
wanted
new
to say
Silk Song?
about
Now that Silk Song's out, is Haunted Chocolatier the game that we get to say is never coming out, or is there a different one? I don't know.
that and Mother 3, probably.
Mother 3 we know is never.
Nah. No, but my wife's favorite game is probably Earthbound, and
Yeah.
we're playing it together for the first time, and she's like, "I'm sorry if this doesn't look amazing," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? This looks like my childhood."
Yeah,
You know?
it's the Earthbound games are so interesting. I played like one of them on my phone when I used to commute downtown in Chicago when I was going to college, and I never finished it, but it was like it really hit in a weird way. I would love to try it again because I never played as a kid, but it's like kind of Pokemon like. I want to say like maybe it's just I think it's that Pokemon is my first vision of that style of like Japanese RPG maybe.
But I don't think it's too dissimilar because you still have
Yeah.
the battle screen.
Yeah.
You still have your overworld. It's very quirky in the way that
Yeah.
Pokemon NPCs are weirdly quirky.
Yeah.
Want to go back real quick to
Yeah,
Binding of
totally.
Isaac because we talked about Newgrounds, we talked about eBaum's world. So much of the art style of Binding of Isaac brings me back to watching Stickman fights on
Yeah.
Newgrounds. Like that was my entire after school thing. And over time, we saw it kind of move into like Flash game with Castle Crashers. And then it sort of became like old internet style. And it's been long enough now where everything loops,
Mhm.
everything's nostalgic. It feels like I'm back in school again. It feels like it's 2005 and I'm looking for something to do between class and rehearsal. I would really love for more devs to take a look at uh, art styles that aren't as high on graphic fidelity, but big on character.
Yeah.
A game I played recently is called Perfect Tide Station to Station, and
Oh.
it's made to look like an old point and click adventure game,
Yeah.
like Maniac Mansion or something like that, but it gets so much mileage out of the art design because it's not trying to get like all the follicles and all the
Yeah.
skin and hair. It's just focused on what are the parts of this character that communicate emotion and how can we put that into the gameplay?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Binding of Isaac right now and I'm getting the same notes.
Yeah, I think it really does a lot. I think Binding of Isaac specifically, I think the art is so fun in what it does with just very small characters and very small enemies and very small items. Like, because you can play it on a tiny, tiny screen. You can run this thing on a potato, basically. And it's exactly that of it's just the art is there to really show you, you get the eyes, you get the this, you get a mouth. It shows characters very distinctly. And I think that's really fun. And to what you're saying, I think it's, a great example of someone who has a style they enjoy and really likes to explore it. And I think a lot of devs are, and I hope more continue to do that with various styles. And, now that this medium has aged long enough, there are people who have originally it was like pixel art was cool because that's what I grew up playing. And now it's like, well, I grew up with PS2 graphics, so I like that kind of style. Or like even people who are like, oh, I never played this style, but now I think that looks cool. Let me find it out. And just, it's interesting to see, like with a lot of modern technology, people choosing a style rather than just going with what is the technology of the time, which I think is a great place, that a luxury that we get to be in, of that you can sort of like, we have the ability to sort of mess with that and explore that rather than just focus on, the cutting edge.
There's always going to be people that will get 4K, 8K,
Hmm.
amazing visuals. Like I'm looking at Sony, I'm looking at
Hmm.
Housemarque. Great games. I love them, but it sounds like similar to you, as I get older, I want games that speak to me rather than try to really dazzle me,
Yeah.
which wasn't always the case.
And I think it's tough, maybe I'm off base here, but like I think a lot of those like really great graphical games also go with a certain style of game that I'm just not interested in anymore, of like those
Sure.
like big open worlds or shooters. Like I frankly games that don't respect my time, of like just like I don't have time to do this. Like you have 100 hours in this game and you expect that? Like I guess I'm torn because I'm both like, that's so cool that that's there, but like sometimes it can feel like a chore. Like are you, is that full of cool stuff or is that full of filler? And I think there's a lot of great examples of games that fill that world beautifully. And I think there are some that make it a lot of fetch quest filler stuff. And I say that, but like I play Mugenics and Binding of Isaac and I have hundreds of hours in those. So I do have hundreds of hours, but I don't want to play it doing that stuff. So I think I don't know what point I'm really trying to make of just, but it's
No,
just like,
no,
I think they sometimes, I see it disconnect with that graphical style sometimes, like with the games that I'm interested in. I think,
yeah,
frankly, because it costs so much money to make it like that, these studios have to be so big, they have to charge so much money, they have to recoup investment. Like, get it, it could be tough, but it's like, the economics start to get weird with it when the gameplay doesn't also hit what I'm looking for.
yeah, and not to beat a dead horse, but there's something about a smaller scope, and I'm a firm believer in limitations
Yeah.
breed creativity. Where some of those games, I'm thinking about like Crimson Desert, maybe the third Arkham game, when the sky is the limit and you have an unlimited budget, you don't think about what's necessarily best for the game or the player or the experience. And I'm not totally immune to that. I love playing the same Far Cry game I bought 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I never need to buy a new one. Same thing with Assassin's Creed. There's a time and a place for it, but
Yeah. Very much
you
so.
get more tailored experiences, I think, with smaller
Yeah.
ones.
And I think that's great is there's something of like, sometimes, I've got a friend who's like, he buys an Assassin's Creed game every year and loves it. And that's basically the only game he plays. And like for
Yep.
him, that really rules because it fits that niche. And I don't want to be too rude to that style of game because I think it fits for a lot of people. But it's, I think we're of a similar mindset of like, I'm more interested in like, for me, I find myself more kind of incremental in these games where I can get a lot of mileage out of the same sort of, I like that roguelike mentality, but also just like I like a small game with a vision.
Did you
And
play
whether it's
Titanium Court?
no, I haven't. You've mentioned this a few times and I'm not familiar with it.
Like everything you're saying, I'm like, that game's your shit. It only
You
came
care
out
to
like
ruin my life?
a little bit, but it's a match three tower defense narrative visual novel.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot
Uh,
of keywords.
yeah,
Oh, this looks
it's
fun. Yeah.
yeah,
Fuck.
man.
This looks like a little bit of XCOM in here sort of vibe.
hmm Plays
Oh,
great on
yeah.
a Steam Deck. You're not going to know what the fuck is going on for the first hour, and then you won't for the second, but the third hour, it might
Then it
unlock.
comes. That's fun too. Like getting to see that come together. Yeah, that's a game I'm gonna have to put away for when I have a lot of time.
Yes.
Someday.
Tom, we're going to wrap up here, but if you had to give a pitch for people to play Binding of Isaac, what would you tell them?
I think the Binding of Isaac is just a great game where you get to learn a lot about trying harder and experimentation. And I think that's really fun. I think it's a game that lets you challenge yourself, but will give you opportunities to feel powerful both through your own growth and also just through sheer dumb luck. And I think that's beautiful. I think the art is fun. I think the story, as loose as it is fun to piece together. And like, we didn't really get into this, but it's a game that's been out for like 15 years or so. And it has had major updates throughout those years to the point where like, I played it for a few years in college, got to what I thought was an ending point. I come back 5 years later. Oh my God, there's like whole new bosses and new areas to come through. And you like add that and like runs get longer and you play that. And then that same thing happens again with new items in another 5 years. And being able to experience a game that had a natural growth, but you can play the whole thing. It's sort of like, telling somebody to watch Breaking Bad. Like, hey, now one of the best things of all time, it's all there for you, man. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to get it on the hype. Somebody already vetted it for you. It's just all there and it's all really good. And it's probably going to go on sale for like $4 on Steam. So like, you're going to have a great time. I understand why people might bounce off it for specific reasons, but if you think you like roguelikes, if nothing about that art makes you upset, I would say it's really fun. I think it's a really good exploration and there's always something new to learn. And it's a great way to just, if you want to delete some time on a car ride, an airplane, waiting for the dentist, it's fantastic for that. So it's always there for you.
I love that. And now tonight I'm going to play that in Eugenics, and you'll probably get an email from me in a week that's just like, why did you ruin my life? So thank you, Tom, for that.
Well, you gave me the Titanium Core game, so maybe we're even.
Yeah. No, dude, you need to come back to me in a week and just tell me how far you are. That's going to do it for this episode of Last Save Lounge. As always, thank you to Tom Dyke. You can go to his itch.io page or itch.io. I don't know how the kids are saying it.
I don't know how they say it either, man. I've been on it for a bit. I don't know.
You can pick up Rocket Lairs, Dragonairs, and his other games. Tom, this is super fun. Thanks so much for carving out some time.
Yeah.
Go check out all the videos on the McElroy Family. Check out the archives of the Max Fun stream I did. It's just a great time of year to get some really cool content.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And this was so fun to chat. So glad to get some Pokemon, some Binding of Isaac. It's always fun to talk games with people who love them. Great catching up, man. This was such a blast.
Yeah. All right. The Last Save Lounge is produced by Hoodie Weather, creating comfy games and podcasts broken in like your favorite hoodie. You can support Hoodie Weather by heading to patreon.com/hoodieweather and becoming a patron for just $1. Next week, we're going to be welcoming the devs from Mux Games, talking about their upcoming Kickstarter and video game. And until then, I will probably be playing Binding of Isaac. I'll see you later.